Have you ever really stopped to think about a nation that's made up of, what, more than 700 islands? I mean, a place where you find this incredible mix of vibrant cultures, really deep ancient traditions, and these powerful global forces all coming together to create something totally unique. A land that people have called the Pearl of the Orient Seas for centuries.
Yeah, it's quite something.
Well, if you haven't, get ready, because today we're diving deep. We're heading right into the fascinating, sometimes complex, but always resilient heart of the Philippines.
And that's exactly our mission today. We want to guide you on an insightful journey into this truly remarkable archipelago nation. We'll be working to unpack its intricate identity, an identity shaped so profoundly by its geography, its really dynamic culture, its rich and often pretty turbulent history, and of course those powerful symbols that really speak to its unique spirit. Our goal here is to synthesize all this diverse information, maybe spot some underlying patterns, and connect the dots for you. So you can understand not just what exists or what happened, but more critically, why it matters, What are the enduring impacts we still see today? We really want you to think critically, consider the bigger picture, the implications of everything we discuss.
And to help us illuminate this incredible story, we've pulled together a pretty comprehensive set of sources. Our main guide, sort of the backbone for this exploration, is a document called USC in 3131 Philippine History 2022.pdf. And this thing, it offers a really thorough, expansive look at the nation's background, its culture, which is just captivating, its complex history, and all those evocative national symbols we're going to unpack.
Yeah, it's a solid foundation.
Definitely. And complementing that, we've layered in some excellent supplementary web sources, too. These add some crucial extra context, giving us deeper insights into things like the nation's indigenous groups, specific cultural practices, and the really rich stories behind many of those key national figures and cherished emblems.
That's right. Think of this deep dive as, your shortcut to being genuinely well-informed about a really strategically vital and culturally rich part of Southeast Asia. You're going to come across some surprising facts, things that might just reshape how you see it. You'll get multiple perspectives on some complex issues, and I promise you'll definitely have those aha moments, all without feeling, buried in information. It's about getting clarity and context efficiently.
I'm genuinely curious to get into these rich layers, to really explore what makes the Philippines so unique. It's always such a joy, I find, to discover the intricate details that define a vibrant country like this one. I have a feeling we're going to uncover some truly unexpected insights today, things that will give us a much deeper appreciation.
And that's precisely what we're aiming for. We'll explore the fascinating interplay of all these elements, tracing how these diverse influences have shaped this singular, unique identity. So let's start our journey. Let's ground ourselves first in the physical reality of the Philippines. Understanding the geography, the geology, that tapestry really sets the stage for everything else.
Okay, so we're talking about a nation that's just fundamentally defined by its geography.
Yeah.
An archipelago, right? And like we said, not just a few islands, but more than 7,100 islands. That scale?
Yeah.
Just thinking about it conjures up images of, vastness and incredible diversity. What does that actually mean for the Philippines being an archipelago beyond just that huge number?
That's the perfect place to begin, because that number, over 7,100 islands, it isn't just a statistic, it's a foundational characteristic. It shapes almost every single aspect of Filipino identity. This fragmented geography immediately sets the Philippines apart, both regionally and globally. Geographically, its location is key. It lies strategically off the southeast coast of the Asian mainland between Borneo and Taiwan. This positioning places it right in the heart of Southeast Asia, alongside countries like Malaysia, Singapore, Brunei, Indonesia. It's a natural crossroads.
Being situated right there, smack dab between these significant landmasses and cultures, it must mean it's been exposed to just a multitude of influences for centuries.
Precisely. That geographic openness has been profoundly impactful. The Philippines, just by its nature, has always been open to different and diverse cultural influences coming from around Asia and beyond. And this isn't just some historical footnote, it's a living reality. It shaped everything, their religious landscape, their languages, the food, even fashion, as we'll see. And it's also really crucial to remember that Ethnically, Filipinos are mostly Malay people. This connects them intrinsically, culturally and ethnically, to this broader regional demographic. It embeds them firmly within the diverse tapestry of Southeast Asian peoples. This vast, fragmented landscape of islands also inherently fosters distinct regional identities, which, well, we'll see play out again and again.
I can only imagine the logistical challenges, governing a nation spread across so many islands, or just the sheer diversity that must naturally spring up. It must mean that these distinct regional identities aren't just a concept, they're a very tangible, everyday reality.
Oh, absolutely. They are. This archipelagic structure naturally leads us to understand the Philippines as being composed of three major regions. You've got Luzon, the largest island up north where the capital is. Then there's the Visayas, a central group of islands, and Mindanao, the largest island down south. And these aren't just lines on a map, They possess distinct political, social, and cultural differences. And these differences, they're deeply ingrained. They affect everything from local governing styles and community structures to specific cultural practices, and, as we'll get into soon, even the main languages spoken in those areas. It's definitely a mosaic, not a monolith.
And within these big regions, there must be key cities that act as like vital hubs, anchoring the local economies and cultures. What are some of those really critical cities we should know about?
Yeah, beyond the national capital, Manila, which is in Luzon, you find other really significant urban centers. These serve as critical nodes for population, trade, culture within their respective regions. So in the Visayas, Cebu really stands out. Mindanao boasts major cities like Davao, Cotabato, and Zamboanga. And even further south, there's Jolo in the Sulu archipelago, which is technically part of Mindanao.
Right.
Each of these cities carries its own unique history, plays a crucial role in its region's economic and cultural life. And Manila, well, as we'll explore in more detail later, it had this particularly storied past, eventually becoming known as the famous Pearl of the Orient Seas.
So, okay, this geographical fragmentation, this cultural fragmentation, it feeds directly into the country's incredible linguistic diversity, doesn't it? It starts to make perfect sense now why a single nation could be home to such a vast array of languages spread across thousands of islands.
It's an absolutely direct connection, yeah. Now, stepping back for a moment from the human settlements, let's think about the raw, powerful forces of the natural environment. These continuously shape daily life across the Philippines. What's the overall climate like, and what are those deeper geological realities going on?
Well, the climate, it's undeniably tropical, consistently warm, and that's a direct result of the Philippines' location, right? 5 to 20 degrees north of the equator.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're definitely not going to find any snow there, that's for sure.
Exactly. And that consistent warmth, it isn't just pleasant weather, it profoundly influences daily life. It dictates agricultural cycles. You have two main distinct seasons. The dry season, usually March to June, and then the monsoon season from July to October.
Okay.
And this rhythm, it shapes everything from farming practices to, well, even architecture. Think about the traditional bahay kubo, that quintessential Filipino house, or even the practical design of traditional clothing like the Barong Tagalog, often made of sheer fabrics. These are direct, ingenious adaptations to the pervasive warmth and humidity. It's about making daily life comfortable and sustainable in that specific climate.
But the climate's only one piece of the puzzle, isn't it? The geological reality of the Philippines. That introduces a far more dramatic and kind of ever-present element. It lies on the edge of the so-called Ring of Fire. That phrase alone just conjures images of immense natural power.
It truly does. The Ring of Fire isn't just some abstract concept on a map. It's a dynamic, active geological reality, a chain of active volcanoes marking the intersection of two tectonic plates. And this fundamental geological position means, quite starkly, that the possibility of an earthquake or volcanic eruption is an ever-present danger.
Wow.
This isn't a rare, once-in-a-lifetime event for them. It's a deeply ingrained aspect of life in the Philippines. It influences everything from urban planning and building codes to cultural practices, maybe even people's outlook on life itself. It really raises a fascinating and profound question, doesn't it? How does living with this inherent daily potential for powerful natural events shape the resilience, the adaptability, the community spirit, and perhaps even the cultural narratives of the Filipino people?
Yeah, that's a really profound thought. It must instill a certain perspective, a kind of deep connection to the Earth's power. The Ring of Fire isn't just some geographical feature you point to. It's a relentless force, a daily reality that unquestionably shapes the very essence of the nation and its people. Okay, so moving from the physical landscape, those thousands of islands, the powerful forces of the Ring of Fire, let's now really dive into the human element. the Filipino people themselves. One of the things that just jumps out immediately is the sheer linguistic diversity. We're talking about some 78 different spoken languages and 500 dialects across the archipelago.
Right.
I mean, that number alone is just astonishing.
It is, isn't it? And this linguistic richness is a direct result of that geographical fragmentation we just talked about, combined with centuries of unique historical development on each island or region. Now, while the majority of Filipinos do speak Tagalog, or Filipino, which serves as the national language, and they absolutely share the same national identity, our sources make it clear that each different group tends to identify with the primary language group to which it belongs. So this creates this truly vibrant, complex linguistic mosaic. You have national unity coexisting with really strong regional linguistic pride. It's a delicate balance, I think, but a fascinating one to observe.
So even with a national language that unifies people, they still feel this deep connection to their local tongue.
Yeah.
That must create a really interesting dynamic within the country, between that shared national identity and these deeply rooted regional linguistic differences. Beyond Tagalog, what are the most widely spoken languages across this mosaic?
Yeah, it's a key feature.
Yeah.
Besides Tagalog, which is primarily spoken in the provinces around Manila and Luzon, another principal language is Cebuano. That holds sway throughout the Visayas and large parts of Mindanao. But the linguistic landscape, it goes far beyond just those two.
Right.
Our sources list several other major languages, things like Ilocano, Hiligaynon, Bicol, Waray, Pampango, and Pangasinan. Each of these carries its own distinct cultural nuances and history. What's particularly fascinating, though, and really significant, is the role of English. It's explicitly stated that English is widely spoken throughout the islands and is the language of education and trade. Now, this isn't just a casual observation. It's an enduring legacy from a specific historical era, the American colonization, that has profoundly shaped their modern society, their economy, and even their global competitiveness today.
That's a really important point. English essentially acts as a lingua franca, doesn't it? Bridging all those different local languages and dialects. It makes perfect sense that a nation with so much internal linguistic diversity would benefit hugely from a common language for things like higher education, wider commerce, and, well, international communication.
Exactly. This linguistic richness isn't just a statistic, it's a fundamental piece of their cultural fabric. Now let's talk about another crucial layer of this identity, the indigenous groups. These aren't just small minorities, they represent the ancient roots of the archipelago.
Yes. The sources mention the presence of almost 50 other indigenous tribal groups in the Philippines, and they make up about 20% of the population. That's significant. And it explicitly says they are historically and culturally different from the mainstream group of Filipinos. This really highlights a distinct and substantial part of the population that has maintained unique ways of life for centuries, maybe millennia.
Absolutely. These indigenous groups are, in so many ways, the keepers of ancient identities. They maintain traditions, cultural practices, languages that predate much of the nation's recorded history, certainly pre-colonial history. And crucially, the sources point out, they have long struggled to keep their land and cultural identity intact.
That struggle sounds profound.
It is. And it's not just about fighting for territorial boundaries. It's profoundly existential for them. Their ancestral land is intrinsically linked to their very cultural survival, their traditional practices, their unique spiritual beliefs, their distinct worldviews. It's all tied to the land. Take, for instance, the specific mention of Manobo women Caraga Philippines in our sources. It helps to ground this abstract idea of diverse indigenous groups in a concrete example of a specific community striving to preserve its unique heritage against many pressures.
So their fight isn't just for territory, but for the very essence of who they are, their unique cultural expressions, their connection to their ancestors, their heritage. This really raises a vital question, doesn't it? What value is placed today on preserving these unique cultures within the broader national fabric of the Philippines? How does this society try to reconcile national integration with the moral imperative of cultural preservation for these distinct groups?
It is indeed a critical question, and honestly one that the Philippines continues to grapple with. Their unique contributions undeniably enrich the overall national identity, offering diverse perspectives and this incredibly deep historical continuity. However, their ongoing struggles highlight these broader, complex issues of land rights, cultural self-determination, and that delicate balance between fostering national unity and respecting profound cultural differences. This complex interplay of identity, geography, and history leads us nicely into understanding how the Philippines, and specifically its capital, Manila, was once perceived on the global stage as the illustrious Pearl of the Orient Seas.
Ah, yes. Manila becoming known as the Pearl of the Orient, or Perlesning Silenganan. That's such a poetic, really evocative name. What exactly propelled Manila to that peak status? What made it a pearl in the global imagination back then?
Well, our sources clearly state that Manila's zenith, its peak status, was primarily driven by the exchange of Spanish silver for Chinese luxury goods. This was the famous Manila galleon trade. For over 2 centuries, from the 16th right through to the 19th century, this trade route connected Asia, the Americas, and Europe, with Manila right at the heart of it.
Wow, 2 centuries.
Yeah, imagine vast quantities of silver mined in places like Potosi in colonial Mexico, flowing across the Pacific Ocean through Manila's ports to acquire precious silks, intricate porcelain, exotic spices, and other luxury goods from China. These goods then made the return journey across the Pacific to Mexico, and from there, onwards to Spain and the rest of Europe. This trade established Manila as an absolutely pivotal global trading hub. It generated immense wealth and cemented its international influence as this crucial nexus of commerce and, importantly, cultural exchange.
And it sounds like that huge wealth wasn't just, hoarded by a few or immediately shipped off to Spain. It was actually reinvested back into the city itself, building up its foundational infrastructure.
That's precisely right, and it's a really crucial detail to grasp. The substantial profits generated from this incredibly vigorous trade supported the construction of schools, charitable hospitals, and societies. This demonstrates an early and really significant form of urban development and social welfare initiatives, directly funded by the city's thriving role in global commerce. These investments laid some of the critical groundwork for modern societal institutions in Manila, impacting education, healthcare, community welfare for centuries to come. This historical economic context truly illuminates Manila's enduring importance and its legacy as this vibrant, cosmopolitan global city, a genuine pearl in its time.
Okay, so from the people and their history as this major global trading hub, let's now shift our focus to the powerful symbols that really embody the Philippines' national identity. I found it quite interesting reading the sources that there's this distinction made between official symbols and proclaimed national emblems. What's the difference there? What's the nuance in how they're recognized?
That's a very sharp observation, and it really speaks to the layered way a nation goes about formalizing its identity. Our sources clarify that the official national symbols are those that have been explicitly codified into law, specifically by Republic Act 8491, which is known as the Flag and Heraldic Code of the Philippines.
Okay, so that's the law.
Right. This category includes things like the Philippine flag itself, the national anthem Lupang Hinirang, the coat of arms, and other specific heraldic items and devices. These are legal designations, and they come with specific protocols for their use and display. Then you have what are called proclaimed national symbols.
Proclaimed.
Okay. These are enacted not through comprehensive law like the flag code, but through an executive proclamation, so a different legal basis. However, their purpose is equally profound. They represent Philippine traditions and ideals and convey the principles of Philippine sovereignty and national solidarity. This group includes beloved symbols like the sampaguita flower, the Nara tree, the Philippine eagle, and the Philippine pearl.
So one category is legislated by Congress. The other is enacted by the executive branch, like the president, but both are clearly intended to carry significant cultural weight and define how the nation sees itself and presents itself to the world. It's about both formal legal recognition and maybe a more symbolic traditional recognition, but equally powerful definitions of national identity.
Exactly. Both carry immense weight.
Let's really dive into some of these key symbols then, starting with the flag itself. It's such a powerful visual, it seems like it tells a real story.
Oh, the Philippine flag is indeed a profound and incredibly layered symbol. It really tells a story of struggle, inspiration, and connection. It was first officially unfurled on May 28, 1898. This was a moment of immense triumph, immediately following the Philippine Revolutionary Army's decisive victory over Spanish forces in the battle at Alapan down in Imus, Cavite.
Right after a major victory.
Exactly. And what's truly fascinating and what our sources really emphasize is that its design embodies the circular and cosmopolitan nature of our revolution. Now, that phrase, cosmopolitan nature, it isn't just about local struggle. It signals that the Filipino Revolution was connected to broader, global intellectual currents of freedom and self-determination.
Cosmopolitan nature of our revolution. It's a really striking and intriguing phrase. What exactly does that mean in terms of the flag's specific design elements? How did these global ideals become so deeply ingrained in a national symbol that feels so uniquely Filipino?
It means the flag consciously draws its inspiration from this remarkable confluence of revolutionary ideals from all around the world, but then adapts them masterfully to the unique Filipino context. Take the prominent white triangle, for instance.
Right.
On one level, it represents the Katipunan, the secret society, whose actions really ignited the Philippine Revolution against Spain. But the shape and the concept of that triangle, they reach much further back, connecting to powerful, almost universal symbols of enlightenment and revolution. It was influenced, the sources say, by the eye of providence that you find in the Great Seal of the United States.
Oh, wow.
Which in turn inspired the Masonic triangle. And this symbolic lineage eventually found its way into the enduring motto of Revolutionary France, Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité. And as our sources point out, this symbolic triangle is prominently enshrined on the flags of Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines, as well as nations sharing similar struggles against colonial powers.
Wow. So it's not just a uniquely Filipino symbol that was born in isolation. It's intrinsically part of this global revolutionary language, echoing the aspirations of other oppressed peoples who were seeking freedom from empire. That's truly insightful. I hadn't made those connections.
Exactly. It shows they were looking outwards as well as inwards. Furthermore, the flag incorporates stripes and colors derived from the American flag. And this is explicitly acknowledged as borrowing from the banner of the First Republican Revolution against European monarchy. It's a nod to that earlier anti-colonial struggle. And the sun and the three stars, they are drawn from the revolutionary banners of the former colonies of Spain, showing a sense of solidarity and a shared historical experience with other nations breaking free from Spanish imperial rule. All these diverse elements, combined with the unique Filipino spirit and context, create a national flag that has endured and has been enshrined in our nationhood. It's a powerful statement embodying both a unique national struggle and a connection to a universal revolutionary spirit.
That's an incredible amount of history and meaning embedded in a single design. It really makes you look at it differently. And then we have the national anthem, Lupang Hinirang. The sources mention it's always sung in the national language, Tagalog or Filipino. This seems like another really powerful layer reinforcing identity through a shared cultural act, right?
It absolutely is. That strict protocol, the rule that the national anthem shall always be sung in the national language within or without the country, serves a profound purpose. It reinforces both the national language, Filipino, and a singular national identity through this powerful, unifying musical expression. Every single time it's sung, whether at a school assembly or an international event, it's a daily communal act of cultural and national assertion. It's a constant reminder of shared heritage and belonging.
Moving from those core state symbols to the natural world, the Nara is designated as the national tree. I learned it's highly prized for cabinet work, has this amazing reddish or rose color. What makes the Nara tree such a fitting symbol for the nation?
Well, in Nara, its scientific name is Pterocarpus indicus, sometimes called India Padock, is indeed notable for both its strength and its beauty. Its wood is described as hard and heavy, often attractively variegated with yellow, and its distinct grain and coloring are hardly equaled by any other timber. It's particularly noted for the ability of its wood to take a high polish.
So strong and beautiful.
Exactly. As the national tree, it profoundly represents the enduring strength, the resilience, and the natural beauty of the Philippine environment itself. It reflects the nation's robustness, its valuable natural resources, and maybe even a sense of inherent dignity.
And the Sampaguita, the national flower. It symbolizes purity and oneness of purpose, the flower of one's oblation to humanity. That's quite a delicate yet deeply virtuous symbol, isn't it? Very aspirational.
It truly is. It signifies this spirit of selflessness, dedication, and offering oneself metaphorically for the greater good of humanity. It's small, fragrant, but carries a deep meaning. Then you have the Philippine pearl, which is internationally renowned as the South Sea pearl.
Right, very famous.
Very famous. And it's explicitly described in the sources as a distinctive part of our socioeconomic and cultural tradition. It has been designated as the national gem. This really highlights the nation's rich natural wealth derived from its oceans, its deep historical connection to its maritime heritage. It symbolizes both significant economic value and this intrinsic cultural richness tied to the sea.
And the Philippine eagle, Pithecophagga jaffrey, a majestic creature found only in the Philippines, right? A unique natural treasure and, understandably, a huge source of national pride. Protecting that incredible bird must be a monumental conservation effort, I imagine.
It is indeed. It's a flagship species for conservation in the Philippines, and its status as the national bird powerfully symbolizes the unique and sadly threatened biodiversity of the country. It underscores the nation's profound commitment to protecting its rare and majestic natural heritage, serving as a testament to the country's ecological significance on a global scale. It's a living symbol of national pride and responsibility.
Now, shifting to a human symbol, perhaps one of the most pivotal figures, if not the most pivotal, among the national symbols, Dr. Jose Rizal. His impact just seems impossible to overstate in the whole narrative of Filipino nationalism canon.
Not at all. Jose Protasio Rizal, born in 1861, stands as the unequivocal national hero of the Philippines. He authored those two profoundly influential revolutionary novels, No Me Tancheri in 1887 and its sequel, El Filibusterismo in 1891. These literary works weren't just stories, they were searing indictments of the injustices and abuses of Spanish colonial rule.
Right, they really lit a fire.
They did. They were instrumental in galvanizing and inspiring the Filipino propaganda movement, which positioned Rizal as one of the main ideologues of Filipino nationalism. His intellectual leadership, his powerful writings, and ultimately his martyrdom, his execution by firing squad at Bagumbayan, which is now Rizal Park, on December 30th, 1896, were foundational events. His sacrifice solidified his place as a symbol of enlightenment, peaceful resistance through ideas, and the ultimate price paid in the long struggle for independence. He showed the power of the pen.
So he essentially laid the intellectual and the emotional groundwork for a revolution with his powerful writings and his martyrdom, even though he himself wasn't necessarily advocating for armed struggle initially. And finally, the currency, the pesos. It's described in a rather poetic way in the sources, multicolored threads woven into the fabric of our social, political, and economic life. I like that imagery.
Yes, it's a lovely way to put it. The currency, beyond just its utilitarian monetary value, is envisioned here as a dynamic artifact, a kind of historical document in your pocket. It features a visual narration of the development of the Philippine economy parallel to the evolution of its currency. This means that the pesos themselves, the different series, the designs on the bills and coins, they serve as living documents. Each design, each iteration reflects and embodies the nation's economic journey, its changing social fabric, its political progress, its heroes, its natural wonders over time. It's a fascinating way to look at something we handle every day, isn't it?
That's a fantastic way to frame something as seemingly mundane as money. But hang on, before we transition, I want to circle back and clarify something quite important that was mentioned in our sources. It explicitly states that some very commonly believed national symbols, things deeply ingrained in popular culture, are actually not officially recognized by law. For instance, karaoke is not the national dance. Now there's tinikling, which I think many people, including myself maybe, might assume.
That's right. It's a common misconception.
And things like the carabao, the water buffalo as the national animal, or the mango as the national fruit, or the nipa hut, the bahay kubo as the national house. All technically unofficial, despite being incredibly widespread symbols that everyone recognizes.
That's a crucial clarification, and it speaks volumes about the organic nature of national identity, how it forms from the ground up, not just top down. The source states quite clearly that Cariñosa is not the national dance of the Philippines, neither is it tinikling. It also explicitly mentions that all those claims circulating through various sources regarding the supposed Philippines national animal, carabao, national fish, bangus, national house, nipa hut, national leaf, anaha, national fruit, mango, national sport, sipa, have, and this is the key phrase, no basis in Philippine law.
Wow. So what does this tell us about the fascinating difference between a symbol being officially legislated, stamped by the government, and one becoming deeply ingrained, perhaps even more powerfully, in the popular consciousness, in the hearts and minds of a nation?
It reveals a really profound dynamic, I think. While these symbols might not possess formal legal designation, they hold immense cultural weight. They are profoundly recognized, cherished, and utilized by the Filipino people as representations of their identity. Take the bahay kubo, the nipa hut, for instance.
Yeah, instantly recognizable.
Totally. It's a traditional dwelling used by lowland Filipinos and can still be found throughout the country. Its primary building materials are local, sustainable things like bamboo, along with rattan and various grasses for the roofing. And it's distinctively raised above the ground on either wood or bamboo poles, a design feature which practically spares the inhabitants of some of the effects of humidity.
Right, keeps it cool and dry.
Exactly. This design is a brilliant, practical adaptation to the tropical climate using readily available local materials. And it remains this powerful, iconic, visual representation of rural Filipino life, community, and ingenuity. It might not be official, according to the law, but it is undoubtedly iconic and culturally foundational.
And the carabao, the water buffalo.
Yeah.
Even though it's technically unofficial, you immediately associate it with Filipino agriculture, right?
Mm-hmm.
That image of hard work, resilience, the very spirit of rural life.
Absolutely. The carabao, Bublus bubalis, whether in its wild or domestic form, is a quintessential symbol of Filipino agriculture, diligence, patience, and the backbone of rural life. It's deeply embedded in the popular imagination. It's in countless artwork, stories. It's an unmistakable part of the national landscape, despite lacking that official government designation.
Yeah.
The same really goes for the Mango mangifera indica. It's described as one of the most important and widely cultivated fruits of the tropical world. It simply represents the nation's rich agricultural bounty, that sweetness, that abundance. And the Cariosa dance, while not the official national dance, it is widely beloved. It's a waltz modified into different styles, of which the Carinosa courtship variation was especially popular. It reflects a cherished cultural expression, particularly its graceful, flirtatious courtship theme, and it's widely recognized and performed as a representative folk dance across the islands.
So what does this entire phenomenon really tell us about how national identity develops organically? It seems like some of the most potent, most meaningful symbols become significant through popular consensus, through shared experience, perhaps even more so than through a legislative act or a presidential proclamation.
Precisely. I think it tells us that national identity is this complex, evolving tapestry. It's woven not solely from top-down official declarations, but just as powerfully, maybe even more powerfully, from grassroots cultural practices, from deeply held beliefs, from shared collective experiences and memories. These unofficial symbols are powerful precisely because they resonate so deeply with the everyday lives, the traditions, the history, and the aspirations of the Filipino people. They often capture the living, breathing culture of the nation more intimately, perhaps, than any formal decree ever could. It really demonstrates that identity is forged in daily life, in communities, just as much as it is in legislative halls or history books.
That's a fascinating look at how identity is formed, both the official stamp and the organic growth. Let's transition now into an equally fascinating narrative: the evolution of Filipino fashion. Because clothing is never just about covering up, is it? It's always a profound cultural statement, a reflection of history, climate, social dynamics. And it appears Filipinos were quite open to integrating Western influences into their clothing styles from pretty early on.
They were indeed. Our sources note a really significant cultural adaptation here. They state that long ago, Filipinos welcomed Western fashion into their daily lives, such that by the early 19th century, only vestiges of pre-colonial clothing styles remained. This shows a dynamic cultural exchange, a remarkable adaptability to external influences, rather than, say, a rigid adherence to purely indigenous forms. It wasn't about wholesale replacement, but integration and adaptation.
Right.
And this trend of integrating foreign styles, it continued well into the 20th century. We see that the influence of modern international fashion has greatly affected the traditional formal Philippine women's dress called the terno.
So even their most iconic traditional garments weren't immune. They were constantly being shaped and refined by these outside forces. That brings us directly to the terno, which sounds like the quintessential idealized formal dress for Filipino women. What makes it so distinctive, especially that dramatic silhouette everyone recognizes?
The present-day terno is undeniably striking, isn't it? It's described as elegant in its ankle length and form-fitting cut, and it really defines the idealized attire of the Filipina. But its most characteristic of all, the thing that makes it instantly recognizable, is the terno's dramatic butterfly sleeves that clearly differentiate it from Western evening wear.
Those sleeves are iconic.
They are. And what's truly insightful is its evolutionary history. The source explains that the contemporary terno evolved from a much older union of the European-style skirt, the saya, that was combined with a pre-Hispanic sarong-style dress, the tapis, which was used as an overlapping attachment similar to an apron. So right there, you see this perfect example of cultural fusion in action, blending European silhouettes with indigenous elements to create something new and unique.
So it's this profound fusion of European and indigenous forms. But there's that really interesting social dynamic mentioned with the tapes, the apron-like garment, isn't there? It seems it wasn't universally embraced by everyone.
There is, and it offers this fascinating sociological window into fashion and class. The source highlights that upper-class mestizo women of Spanish and Filipino parentage would often shun the tapis because of its visual association with a work apron.
Ah, the class distinction.
Exactly. This seemingly small detail reveals a crucial aspect of social hierarchy during the colonial period. The tapis, originally a practical, perhaps everyday garment for many, became coded with the imagery of manual labor and lower social standing. So for the aspiring upper classes, consciously distinguishing themselves from this association through their clothing choices was paramount. It really raises that important question. How do fashion choices, even subtle ones like adding or removing an apron-like garment or tucking in a shirt, communicate and reinforce social status, aspiration, and identity within a society?
That's a truly powerful point. Fashion is clearly never just about aesthetics or practicality. It's always coded with these deep social meanings. It speaks volumes about class and identity. And then you have the upper body coverings, the camisa and the pañuelo, adding further layers of, well, modesty and elegance to the overall Terno ensemble.
Exactly. The upper body of the terno was traditionally covered by a blouse, camisa or baro, that was topped with an embroidered kerchief-like drape, the pañuelo, often quite elaborate, that was worn around the bodice to preserve a woman's modesty. So this intricate combination of elements, the flowing saya skirt, the optional tapis, the elegant camisa blouse, and the modest pañuelo drape, all crowned by those unmistakable dramatic butterfly sleeves, demonstrates how practicality, evolving social norms, and aesthetics intertwined over time to create this iconic and deeply meaningful garment.
Okay, now let's turn our attention to the men's equivalent, in a way, the Barong Tagalog. This is where the story of fashion takes a particularly compelling turn, especially in its profound connection to Filipino nationalism and resistance. This story really stood out to me.
This is truly a standout aha moment, I think, for understanding how identity can be asserted through everyday culture, through something as simple as a shirt. Let's trace its origins first. Initially, back in the mid-18th century, Christian Filipino men wore relatively simple attire. They had trousers that reached slightly below the knee and wore these loose shirts with short sleeves called the baro.
Just a basic shirt.
Pretty much. Over time, these shirts gradually gained decorative embroidery, becoming a bit more elaborate. But aside from the native hat, the salaka, the sources say, there were very few other clothing items, and male clothing styles did not change markedly for a long period. It was largely driven by practicality in the hot, humid, tropical climate.
So a very practical, humble garment, really well suited to the environment. But then, just like with the Terno, Western influence started to affect men's fashion too, especially among the upper classes trying to emulate the colonizers.
Yes, that's precisely what happened. By the early 19th century, the source notes, upper-class Filipinos began a wholesale adoption of the Spanish style of dress, which even included walking canes, as a way of integrating themselves into the colonial power structure. They were consciously mirroring their colonizers, using fashion, adopting European suits, trousers, the whole ensemble, as a visible means of social ascent and identification with the ruling power.
And this is where the story takes that critical, unexpected turn, leading to a discriminatory dress code that, paradoxically, ended up fueling national pride instead of suppressing it.
Precisely. This is the pivotal moment in the Barong story. In the 1830s, the Spanish colonial government passed a regulation requiring natives to wear their shirts outside of their trousers. Why? Because the practice of tucking in one's shirt was a privileged manner of dress reserved for Spaniards.
Wow, just blatant discrimination through clothing.
Absolutely. This seemingly simple sartorial rule was a clear and deliberate mark of colonial snobbery. It was an explicit attempt to visually distinguish and subordinate the native Filipino population, stripping them of a common marker of dignity and status associated with European dress.
So this act of overt oppression, which was clearly meant to demean and other Filipinos, actually backfired spectacularly. It transformed the humble everyday baro into this powerful symbol of defiance and national pride. That's a really powerful reversal.
It's an incredibly powerful reversal, isn't it? A testament to the resilience of cultural identity when faced with oppression. The source states it beautifully. This discriminatory dress code soon made the lowly baro a symbol of nationalism. Faced with colonial snobbery and derision, the nationalist sought to embrace what his oppressor rejected.
Embrace what the oppressor rejected.
Yeah. This is such a profound example of how an everyday garment, through an act of deliberate resistance and reclaiming, was transformed into a potent political statement and a source of deep national pride. It was not long, the source continues, before the Barrow became today's Barong Tagalog, the physical embodiment of things Filipino and of national pride.
So it wasn't just about defying the colonizers by refusing to tuck in their shirts anymore. It became about actively reclaiming and celebrating their own distinct identity through something as fundamental as how they dressed. And it remained practical for the climate, too, which must have helped cement its place even further.
It did, absolutely. In its process of transformation from the simple barrow to the modern Barong Tagalog, the shirt gained a collar and was made in long and short sleeve versions, becoming more formalized. But crucially, no matter what the color, decoration, or peculiar cut of the individual shirt, the barrow was always made of a sheer native cloth, like piña or juicy fabric.
Right, the sheer fabric is key.
It is. This made them especially well adapted to the country's tropical climate, certainly more so than the heavy layering of thick fabric required of dressing in a European fashion. So its inherent practicality for the tropical climate serendipitously aligned with its powerful symbolic meaning. It made it not only comfortable to wear, but also deeply culturally and politically significant. It was a native solution that became a point of national pride. This evolution truly shows how cultural practices, born from necessity, then molded by oppression and resistance, can become defining features of a nation's identity and enduring symbols of its pride.
We've seen how geography, language, powerful symbols, and even the fascinating evolution of fashion all intertwine to define the Philippines. Now, let's explore perhaps the most profoundly influential aspect of Filipino society and identity, religion. What were the pre-colonial spiritual beliefs like before the major waves of outside religious influences arrived?
Right. Before the arrival of Islam and then Christianity, the indigenous spirituality across the Philippine archipelago was largely animistic. It was deeply connected to nature, the environment, and a profound reverence for ancestors. One of the earliest Spanish priest chroniclers, writing shortly after arrival, noted that the Tagalogs, who were a prominent group around Manila, spoke of Bathala as their principal god.
Okay.
And interestingly, he also noted that other peoples around the archipelago had other terms for this same concept of an all-powerful deity. This suggests a shared foundational belief in some kind of supreme creator or ultimate power across many diverse indigenous groups, even if the names differed.
So a concept of a supreme being, but was there also a wider world of spirits or lesser deities that interacted more directly with the world?
Oh, absolutely. Below Bathala, the most common spiritual entities were the Anitos. These spirits, the sources say, were usually good if properly appropriated, meaning their benevolence often depended on humans maintaining respectful interactions, making offerings, performing rituals correctly.
And you had to appease them in a way.
Yeah. In a way, yes, maintain balance. Anitos could manifest in various forms. They were often believed to be the spirits of deceased ancestors who were supplicated in exchange for help in times of stress. So, a strong element of ancestor worship, seeking guidance and protection from those who came before. Other Anitos were spirits who lived in special natural objects, such as old majestic trees, powerful rivers, or awe-inspiring rock outcroppings. This imbued the entire natural world with spiritual presence and significance. It highlights this complex, interconnected spiritual system where humans, nature, and the spiritual realm were profoundly intertwined. These beliefs deeply influence daily life, rituals, social structures, everything. And it makes you wonder what subtle echoes or syncretic blends of these beliefs might persist even today.
That sounds like a truly rich, deeply interconnected spiritual system, really embedded in the environment and ancestry. And even before the Spanish brought Catholicism, there was already a lot of interreligious dialogue and influence coming from other parts of Asia, wasn't there? The Philippines wasn't some kind of isolated spiritual vacuum waiting to be filled.
Absolutely not, and this is a crucial point that often gets overlooked in simpler narratives. Our sources explicitly highlight that there was a significant amount of interreligious dialogue and exchange between the peoples of Asia in early times. The islanders were variously influenced by the spread of Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, and Islam throughout the region.
Wow, all of those.
Yeah. This means that long before widespread Western contact, the Philippines was already a vibrant spiritual melting pot. You had layers of diverse Asian philosophical and religious traditions influencing its various communities, especially through trade routes. Islam, in particular, had already established a strong presence in the southern islands centuries before Magellan arrived, so it certainly was not a blank slate awaiting conversion.
But then the Spanish arrives in the 16th century, and that dynamic changed fundamentally, dramatically, with the introduction of the Roman Catholic Church. And this wasn't just about sharing a new faith, was it? The sources say it was also a key tool of conquest and colonization.
Indeed. The Spanish arrival changed this dynamic, as the source puts it, as they brought with them the Roman Catholic Church, which was instrumental in setting up colonial rule over the islands. This cannot be understated. It wasn't merely about spiritual conversion, though that was a major goal. It was a critical strategic tool for establishing and maintaining political and social control over this vast, fragmented archipelago.
How did that work in practice?
Well, missionary priests accompanied Miguel López Legazpi's founding expedition in 1565, right from the very beginning. And soon priests had spread throughout the hinterlands to bring the local population into the Roman Catholic community. They established towns centered around the church plaza, introduced new agricultural methods tied to church calendars, imposed new social structures often based on parish boundaries, and fundamentally reshaped the societal landscape over the next 3 centuries. The church became deeply intertwined with the colonial state, facilitating administration, education, and social control.
And because of that long, pervasive, deep influence over 300 years, the Philippines became this unique outlier in Asia, a continent that's predominantly non-Christian.
Precisely. The Philippines holds the remarkable and very distinct status of being the only Christian nation in Asia. That alone is significant. Furthermore, our sources reveal a striking demographic fact. More than 60% of Asia's Christian population lives in the Philippines, and their numbers are increasing.
60%, that's huge.
It's a staggering figure on a continent where other major world religions like Buddhism, Hinduism, and Islam predominate. Now, while the nation became overwhelmingly Roman Catholic due to that long Spanish legacy, the arrival of the Americans at the turn of the 20th century brought another significant shift to this religious landscape.
Right, the U.S. took over from Spain. How exactly did the American influence coming after centuries of Spanish Catholic dominance change the religious picture in the Philippines?
The American colonial regime fundamentally altered the existing religious dynamics in 2 major ways. First, the close working relationship between the Roman Catholic Church and state was dismantled by the U.S. colonial regime. Second, the U.S. introduced a new religion, Protestant Christianity, and a new government mandate, the separation of church and state.
Separation of church and state. That's a big one.
It was a profound ideological shift, directly challenging the previously intertwined relationship between ecclesiastical power and governmental power that had defined the Spanish era for over 300 years. The introduction of Protestantism also offered Filipinos new religious options. Among the various Protestant denominations introduced, our sources highlight the gospel-style Philippines for Jesus movement and the Protestant Iglesia ni Cristo as being particularly large and influential today, demonstrating the diverse expressions of Christianity that took root and flourished alongside Catholicism.
So even within the Christian faith in the Philippines today, there's incredible diversity. And there are uniquely Filipino expressions too, right? What about these indigenous Christian churches that emerged, or even the really dynamic charismatic movements that seem to operate within mainstream Catholicism?
Yes, the religious diversity in the Philippines today is truly a vibrant tapestry, much more complex than just Catholic. Beyond the dominant Roman Catholicism and the various mainline Protestant denominations introduced by the Americans, the nation includes 2 major indigenous Christian churches that are distinctly Filipino creations. One is the Iglesia Filipina Independiente, or IFI, often called the Philippine Independent Church.
IFI, okay.
This emerged as a substantial indigenous church in the early 20th century, right around the time of the revolution against Spain and the arrival of the Americans. It's distinctly described as nationalistic. It was born out of a desire among some Filipino clergy and nationalists for a church led by Filipinos, independent of the Vatican hierarchy, and deeply intertwined with the revolutionary spirit of the time.
And the other major indigenous church, the Iglesia ni Cristo, that one seems very visible, maybe rapidly growing.
It is indeed. The Iglesia ni Cristo, or INC, which means Church of Christ, is a rapidly growing indigenous Christian church. It was founded a bit later, in 1914, by a man named Felix Manalo. His personal story is quite compelling and kind of illustrative of this search for spiritual authenticity outside established structures.
How so?
Well, he was born in 1886, raised Roman Catholic, had limited formal education, but apparently taught himself to read the Bible very diligently. And according to the Church's history and our sources, this intensive study led him to question the consistency with which Catholicism preached its message. This questioning inspired him to found a new, distinctly Filipino Christian faith, claiming a divine mandate to restore the original church established by Christ. It really speaks to a deeper desire for spiritual interpretation rooted in a local context, independent of foreign hierarchies.
Fascinating. And beyond these, people shifted to other faiths, too.
Yes. Still, other Filipinos have shifted their allegiance to a variety of mainline Protestant churches, like Methodists, Baptists, Presbyterians, and the Mormon Church, which also has a significant presence.
And what about within Catholicism itself? You mentioned this charismatic movement, El Shaddai, that seems to operate almost independently and attracts massive followings.
Yes, even within the vast structure of the Roman Catholic Church in the Philippines, there's this dynamic and somewhat autonomous phenomenon, the semi-autonomous charismatic El Shaddai movement. The sources state it claims 8 million members, an enormous number, and its dynamic leader, Mariano brother Mike Velarde, frequently upstages the formal church leadership with his huge rallies and perceived direct connection to followers.
8 million, wow.
It showcases a vibrant, evolving, and sometimes challenging aspect within mainstream Catholicism. It demonstrates how large-scale, popular, charismatic movements can engage and mobilize vast populations, sometimes in ways that diverge from or exist alongside traditional hierarchical church structures.
And then, we absolutely cannot forget Islam. As you mentioned earlier, it holds a much older presence in parts of the Philippines than Christianity itself.
Absolutely essential to remember. Islam is the largest religious minority group in the Philippines today, and crucially, it is a much older presence than Christianity in the archipelago. Its roots go back to the 13th century, maybe even earlier, arriving through trade routes from Indonesia and Malaysia.
Centuries before Magellan.
Centuries before. Estimates place the current Muslim population somewhere between 3.9 million and 7 million people, which is roughly 5 to 9% of the total population. And there's a very distinct geographical concentration. About 94% of these Filipino Muslims are concentrated in the western and southern part of the island of Mindanao, the Sulu archipelago, and in the southern tip of Palawan. Their deep historical roots in these regions, their distinct sultanates that existed long before Spanish arrival, and their unique cultural heritage highlight a distinct and enduring identity that is absolutely integral to the broader, complex Filipino national identity.
This incredible tapestry of faiths. Catholicism, Protestantism, indigenous Christian churches, Islam, charismatic movements, probably lingering indigenous beliefs too clearly has a huge impact on the nation's politics. How does religion interact with the state today? You mentioned religious freedom is guaranteed by the Constitution, but is that separation of church and state truly practiced in reality?
That's the million-peso question, isn't it? Our sources state very clearly that today religious freedom is guaranteed by the Constitution. That's the legal framework. However, it immediately follows with a crucial and often intensely debated caveat. However, the separation of church and state rule has never really been implemented in the Philippines.
Never really been implemented. That's a strong statement.
It is, and it's a profoundly significant point, especially when you consider the enduring, pervasive influence of powerful religious institutions, particularly the Roman Catholic Church, given its historical dominance and sheer number of adherents in a nation where faith holds such deep personal and societal importance for so many people.
So, despite the constitutional guarantee of separation, the Catholic Church still holds considerable sway over legislation and public policy debates.
Yes, the source explicitly confirms this. The Catholic Church still has a strong influence in some state legislation in the Philippines, and it provides a concrete, highly relevant example to illustrate this dynamic. The Catholic Church lobbied against the divorce law, which was not approved by the Congress and Senate.
The divorce law. That's a major ongoing issue.
It is. The Philippines remains one of the very few countries in the world without a general divorce law, largely due to the sustained opposition from the Catholic Church hierarchy. This demonstrates how a powerful religious institution can directly and successfully influence national policy on deeply personal matters, even in a constitutionally secular state, by mobilizing its extensive network, its moral authority, and its political connections. It really highlights that inherent tension between a legal ideal of separation and a deeply ingrained societal reality where religious values heavily permeate public life and political discourse.
That's a very clear illustration of the practical reality versus the constitutional ideal. But it's not just about lobbying against certain laws, is it? Churches, both Catholic and Protestant, also play a significant role in broader democratization efforts and social movements, don't they?
Yeah.
They can be forces for change, too.
They absolutely do, and that's the other side of the coin. The Catholic and Protestant churches, too, have been influential in terms of democratization movements. We saw this dramatically during the People Power Revolution that ousted Marcos, where Cardinal Sin played a pivotal role in calling people to the streets. This highlights their dual role in Filipino society. They can be powerful institutional players influencing specific legislation, sometimes conservatively, but they can also be significant forces for social justice and political change, often mobilizing vast numbers of people for broader civic causes and defending human rights.
A complex role.
Very. Finally, it's important to circle back and clarify a key distinction regarding the long-standing conflict in the Southern Islands, particularly in Mindanao. The sources stress that the contemporary disagreement between Muslim peoples of the Southern Islands and the federal government is not so much about religion as about political goals.
That's crucial. Political, not primarily religious.
Exactly. While the conflict certainly involves communities defined by their religious identity, Muslim Filipinos, often called Moros, and the state, predominantly influenced by Christian norms. And while religious identity is a component of the conflict's narrative, the core issues at stake are primarily political. They center on aspirations for self-determination, greater autonomy, control over resources, historical grievances related to land dispossession and marginalization, rather than purely theological differences or religious persecution per se. Making that distinction is vital for accurately understanding the conflict's complex roots and potential solutions.
Okay. From the intricate weave of religion and its political influence, let's pivot now to the broader political landscape of the Philippines and some of the key figures who have really shaped its complex history. To begin, what does the current government structure actually look like? How does it function on paper?
Well, the fundamental framework for the Philippine government is guided by the 1987 Constitution, which, as we noted, was put in place after the Marcos dictatorship. It provides for a presidential form of government. This means you have a strong executive branch led by a president. And a key feature designed specifically to prevent the abuses of the past is that the president's term is limited by law to only 6 years. One single term.
Just one term. Okay. No re-election.
Correct. Like many democratic systems, it operates with 3 distinct branches intended to provide checks and balances on power: the executive presidency, the legislature, bicameral Congress with the Senate and House of Representatives, and the Supreme Court.
So structurally, it sounds pretty similar on the surface to, say, the United States with the 3 branches. But digging into the details, there's a very key difference in how Supreme Court justices are appointed, isn't there? That particular detail really caught my attention in the source material.
Yes, there's a very notable and quite impactful difference there that sets it apart from the U.S. system, and it's worth highlighting. Unlike the procedure followed in the United States, the source points out, the Philippine president selects all of the justices on the Supreme Court without being subject to scrutiny and approval by the legislature.
No confirmation hearings, nothing like that.
Exactly. The president makes the selection, usually from a list prepared by a judicial and bar council, but the final appointment doesn't require legislative confirmation. This means the president has a far more direct and, some would argue, an unchecked hand in shaping the composition and direction of the judiciary compared to systems where legislative approval is needed. This inevitably raises a very important question, doesn't it? What might be the advantages? Perhaps efficiency? Or, more critically, the potential disadvantages of such a system for ensuring judicial independence, maintaining the long-term balance of power between the branches of government, and upholding the public's perception of impartiality within the legal system. It creates a very unique dynamic.
Yeah, that's a system with potentially significant implications for the rule of law, political stability, and how checks and balances actually function in practice. Now, let's shift gears slightly and talk about the Filipino workforce, particularly the huge number of Filipinos who work overseas. They seem to have this remarkable global presence.
They absolutely do. It's a major phenomenon. The Philippines boasts a high literacy rate, widespread proficiency in English, as well as an educated workforce. This unique combination of factors has made Filipinos very competitive overseas.
In what kinds of fields?
All sorts, really.
Yeah.
They are highly sought after in various industries worldwide. You have vast numbers of healthcare professionals, nurses, doctors, caregivers working in the Middle East, Europe, North America. You have huge numbers of maritime workers staffing global shipping fleets. You have engineers, IT professionals contributing to tech sectors, hospitality workers, domestic workers. The list goes on. Their contributions are immense, and crucially, their remittances. The money they send back home to their families are a monumental contribution to the Philippine economy. They play a critical role in national development, supporting household incomes, and alleviating poverty.
It's incredible how a skilled, adaptable, and English-proficient workforce can truly impact a nation's standing on the global stage, becoming a significant economic force through their labor abroad. Okay, now let's dive into some of the pivotal figures that have really marked Philippine history, the names everyone should know, starting way back with Lapu-Lapu. He's often celebrated, almost mythologized, for his unparalleled act of early resistance against the very first wave of colonial forces, isn't he?
Yes, Lapu-Lapu, who was a warrior king or chieftain from Mactan Island, which is now part of Cebu province, stands as this foundational figure in the narrative of Filipino resistance and nationalism. He is renowned as the first to successfully resist the Spanish invasion, and he holds the significant historical distinction of being responsible for the death of Ferdinand Magellan on April 27, 1521, during the Battle of Mactan.
Killing Magellan himself.
Exactly. His successful defiance against the leader of the first European circumnavigation expedition established an early and incredibly powerful precedent for indigenous resistance against colonial forces. It makes him an enduring symbol of bravery, sovereignty, and the refusal to submit.
And then jumping forward many centuries to a figure from a very different era, but one with incredibly deep and lasting ties to the Philippines, the American general Douglas MacArthur.
Douglas MacArthur was, of course, a highly distinguished U.S. Army chief. He became the youngest chief of staff of the U.S. Army and one of only a half-dozen officers who earned the five-star rank during World War II. His connection to the Philippines, though, runs remarkably deep and actually spans generations of his family. He famously served as military advisor to the Philippine Commonwealth with rank of Field Marshal 1936-1941 in the lead up to WWII, and of course, his "I shall return" promise during the Japanese occupation became legendary.
Right, that famous line.
But notably, the connection goes back further. His father was General Arthur MacArthur, who commanded U.S. troops during the Philippine-American War decades earlier. This highlights this remarkable, almost familial continuity of intense military and political ties between the U.S. and the Philippines across two absolutely critical periods of American involvement in the islands, the conquest and the liberation.
Wow, father and son, both deeply involved. Okay, from American military figures back to Filipino revolutionary heroes, those who fought for independence. Gregorio del Pilar, a very young general, is remembered for his extraordinary courage, but he met a tragic, heroic end, didn't he?
Gregorio del Pilar, born in 1875, was indeed one of the youngest Filipino generals in the Philippine Revolution and Filipino-American War. He gained fame, or perhaps notoriety from the American perspective, when he commanded General Aguinaldo's rear guard during his retreat to northern Luzon. His defining moment was the Battle of Tirid Pass in Ilocos Sur on December 2, 1899.
Tirid Pass, yes.
He and a small band of soldiers held off a much larger American force for hours, allowing Aguinaldo to escape further into the mountains. Del Pilar himself was killed in the battle. His death in that valiant sacrificial rearguard action against overwhelming odds cemented his image as a symbol of youthful courage, strategic sacrifice, and tragic heroism in the prolonged, difficult fight for Philippine independence against two successive colonial powers, Spain and then the United States.
Such bravery. Then there's Andres Bonifacio, often revered as the father of the revolution, the one who really ignited the armed struggle. His story is both incredibly inspiring and ultimately quite tragic due to those internal conflicts within the movement itself.
Andres Bonifacio was the supreme leader, or Supremo, of the Katipunan, the secret revolutionary society which he founded on July 7, 1892. He's widely considered the father of the revolution because, unlike some contemporaries who hoped for reform, Bonifacio perceived that Spain would not grant reform and that armed engagement was the only means to achieve national independence from Spain. He truly initiated the armed phase of the struggle.
But his end was tragic.
Yes, his story ends tragically and remains controversial to this day. Due to factionalism and power struggles within the revolutionary movement, particularly with Emilio Aguinaldo's faction, Bonifacio was tried and executed for sedition by the revolutionary government under General Aguinaldo in 1897. This event highlights the complex, sometimes brutal internal divisions and power struggles that unfortunately marked the revolutionary movement, even as it fought a common enemy.
A truly tragic end for such a pivotal figure. Now, Apollinario Mabini, known famously as the Sublime Paralytic, also played a crucial intellectual and strategic role, providing the brains behind the operation, in a way, despite his physical challenges.
Apollinario Mabini, born in 1864, was an extraordinary figure by any measure. A dedicated nationalist, a skilled statesman, a lawyer, a philosopher, and an educator. He became the chief advisor of Emilio Aguinaldo, essentially serving as the prime minister of the First Philippine Republic. He was widely regarded as the most brilliant Filipino mind of the revolutionary era. Despite his legs being paralyzed due to polio earning him that poignant moniker, the Sublime Paralytic, his intellectual contributions, his legal acumen, his drafting of decrees and the constitutional framework, and his strategic thinking were absolutely immense. He provided the ideological and governmental backbone for the fledgling Philippine Republic during its most critical period.
And another key figure in that revolutionary period was Antonio Luna, a military strategist who had actually trained extensively in Europe. He was known for his brilliance and maybe his fiery temper on the battlefield.
Antonio Luna, born in 1866, served as the commander-in-chief of the Army of Liberation of the First Philippine Republic. He truly stood out for his military knowledge. He had studied military strategy and tactics in Europe, including pharmacy and chemistry, and he applied modern European concepts to the Filipino army. He was widely considered the best general of the Philippine-American War, known for his discipline, his attempts to modernize the army, and his aggressive tactics.
And he had a famous brother, too.
Yes, he was the brother of Juan Luna, the famous painter, highlighting a family deeply involved in both the national struggle and the cultural flourishing of the nation. Antonio Luna epitomized military brilliance, strategic foresight, and a commitment to professionalizing the army during the nascent republic's desperate struggle for survival against the technologically superior American forces. His assassination, also under controversial circumstances, possibly linked to Aguinaldo's camp, was a major blow to the revolutionary cause.
So many complex relationships and tragic ends. This brings us squarely to Emilio Aguinaldo himself, a central, maybe the central, figure in the fight for independence, and the man who famously proclaimed Philippine independence and became the first president.
Emilio Aguinaldo, born in 1869, achieved the historic distinction of becoming the president of the First Philippine Republic, 1899. His journey to leadership began earlier as a member of the Magdalo chapter of the Katipunan in Cavite. He swiftly rose through the ranks, gaining military victories and political influence. He was elected president of the revolutionary government at the contentious Tejeras Convention on March 20, 1897, displacing Bonifacio.
Right, that controversial convention.
Yes. He later led the short-lived Biak-na-Bato Republic before going into temporary exile. His most iconic act, however, was upon his return. His proclamation of Philippine independence from Spain at his home in Cavite on June 12, 1898. Although he was eventually captured by American forces in 1901, a major turning point in the Philippine-American War, he lived a remarkably long life, witnessing decades of subsequent Philippine history. He even ran against Quezon for the presidency of the Commonwealth in 1935, but lost. He remains a central, complex, and often controversial figure, embodying both the triumphs and the internal struggles of the revolutionary era.
Now, jumping forward significantly in time to a more modern and certainly controversial period, Ferdinand Marcos, the president who famously declared martial law, that era really represents a period of profound political upheaval and repression in the 20th century.
Ferdinand Marcos served as president of the Philippines for over 2 decades, from 1965 until 1986. His most defining and certainly most infamous action was his declaration of martial law on September 21, 1972. This act suspended the Constitution, shut down Congress, silenced the press, and ushered in a long period of authoritarian rule. This era was characterized by widespread political repression, thousands of documented human rights abuses, alleged massive corruption, and significant economic challenges, despite some initial infrastructure projects.
And his downfall was equally dramatic.
It was. After the People Power Revolution in February 1986, that massive, peaceful uprising we discussed. He was ousted from power and lived in exile in Honolulu, Hawaii, where he died in 1989. His regime fundamentally reshaped modern Philippine society and politics, leaving a deeply complex and intensely contested legacy that continues to be debated fiercely today.
And the man whose brutal assassination became the pivotal catalyst, the spark that really ignited that very revolution against Marcos, was Benigno Ninoy Aquino Jr. His death changed everything.
Benigno Ninoy Aquino Jr., who had been a prominent senator and the chief opposition leader during the martial law period, 1972 to 1981, under President Ferdinand Marcos, became an undeniable martyr for democracy. After years of imprisonment and then exile in the U.S., his return to the Philippines in 1983 ended tragically. His brutal assassination, shot dead on the airport tarmac the moment he stepped off the plane, sent shockwaves through the nation and the world. This shocking, brazen act galvanized popular opposition to the Marcos government like nothing before. It unified diverse opposition groups, ignited widespread public outrage, and directly brought his widow, Corazon Aquino, into power just a few years later, precipitating the dramatic end of the long Marcos regime.
And then following that tragedy, Corazon Cory Cojuangco Aquino, Ninoy's widow, unexpectedly found herself thrust into the political spotlight, becoming president and symbolizing the restoration of democracy after those long, dark years of dictatorship.
Corazon Aquino, Ninoy's widow, became president of the republic from 1986 to 1992. Initially a reluctant candidate, she emerged as the unifying figurehead of the opposition. With Salvador Laurel as a running mate, she led the opposition that overthrew the authoritarian government of President Marcos, who, as we said, went into exile after the hugely successful and remarkably peaceful People's Power Revolution of 1986.
A housewife taking on a dictator.
Exactly. It was an incredible story. Upon taking power, she first established a revolutionary government under the Freedom Constitution, a provisional charter, which was later replaced by the Permanent Constitution of 1987, drafted by a constitutional commission and ratified by the people. Cory Aquino stands as this powerful global symbol of democratic restoration, the astonishing power of nonviolent collective action, people power, and the beginning of a new, though often challenging, era of governance following that long period of dictatorship.
And finally, bringing us closer to the present, a more contemporary figure who represents the recent political landscape, Rodrigo Duterte.
Rodrigo Duterte, born March 28, 1945, is the Filipino politician who was elected president of the Philippines in 2016. Following a long tenure as mayor of Davao City, he won the presidency on a populist platform focused on fighting crime and corruption. On June 30, 2016, Duterte was inaugurated as president of the Philippines. He's also widely known by his nickname, Digong. His presidency, which ended in 2022, represents the most recent chapter in Philippine political leadership, illustrating the ongoing and often turbulent dynamics of Philippine politics in the 21st century, continuing the nation's long and complex journey of self-governance.
Okay, so we've journeyed through the intricate weave of the Filipino people, their culture, their symbols, their leaders, and the profound influences that have shaped them over centuries. Now let's try to tie it all together with a concise yet comprehensive historical timeline, really highlighting the pivotal eras of transformation that have carved the Philippines into the nation it is today. We have to start way back, acknowledging that deep history, reaching long before any colonial contact.
Indeed. That pre-colonial period reveals truly profound ancient roots stretching back millennia. Our sources mention the age of oldest skeletal remains found on Palawan Island, the Taban Man, dating back an astonishing 22,000 BC. That signifies a very early and continuous human presence in the archipelago, indicating a rich, deep prehistory we're still learning about.
22,000 BC. Incredible.
It is. Then fast forward quite a bit to around 500 BCE, and we see evidence that Philippine ports begin trading with China, Southeast Asia, and India. This showcases already well-established and sophisticated maritime trade networks that connected these islands to a vast regional, even intercontinental network. They weren't isolated. And significantly, by the 15th century, so still well before European arrival, Muslim missionaries reached the southern Philippines from Indonesia, establishing that early, vital, and enduring religious and cultural influence that profoundly shaped the southern regions, creating sultanates and distinct societies. This period really shows a vibrant, connected, diverse set of societies existing for millennia before any Western flags appeared on the horizon.
And then came the Spanish colonization, a long, defining, and truly transformative period lasting officially from 1521–1896, although the end bleeds into the Revolution. This era fundamentally reshaped almost everything, didn't it?
It did. This era began dramatically, as we discussed, in 1521, with Ferdinand Magellan arriving in the Philippines, only for him to meet his end at the hands of King Lapu-Lapu, whose forces caused Magellan's flotillas to sail away. That initial indigenous resistance set an important, defiant tone right from the start. However, sustained colonization began in earnest in 1565 when Miguel López de Legazpi takes possession of Cebu, establishing the first permanent Spanish settlement.
Legazpi.
Just a few years later, by 1572, Manila was established and quickly became the center of galleon trade between Mexico and China, cementing its crucial economic importance as that global hub we talked about. The spiritual colonization was also rapid and pervasive. From 1577, 1606, waves of religious orders, Franciscans, Jesuits, Dominicans, and Recollects enter the Philippines, systematically spreading Catholicism throughout the lowlands and effectively aiding in the establishment and maintenance of colonial rule. A significant cultural milestone during this period was the publication of the first book in the Philippines, Doctrina Christiana, in 1593, marking the introduction of the printing press by the Spanish and formal evangelization efforts through printed materials.
But that long colonial period wasn't just peaceful conversion and trade, was it? There was constant, simmering resistance, outright rebellion happening throughout those centuries.
Far from peaceful or uncontested, early and widespread discontent simmered beneath the surface, often boiling over. We see rebellions break out in Bulacan, Batangas, Laguna, and Cavite in 1745, demonstrating that Spanish rule was consistently challenged by local uprisings, often triggered by excessive taxation, forced labor, or land grabbing. Even external powers disrupted Spanish control periodically. England occupies Manila during the 7 Years' War from 1762–1764, holding the capital for a couple of years and remaining beyond the conflict's official end, showcasing the geopolitical vulnerabilities of the distant Spanish colony. But a true, undeniable turning point, one that really ignited a fervent, unified nationalist sentiment like never before, occurred in 1872. This was the Cavite Mutiny, where 200 soldiers at Cavite revolt and call for independence. In the aftermath, 3 Filipino secular priests, Fathers Gomez, Burgos, and Zamora, are garroted to death for inspiring insurrection. These Gomburza martyrs, as they became known, were publicly executed by the Spanish authorities. But instead of crushing dissent, their martyrdom fueled a fire in the hearts of many Filipinos. It exposed the deep injustice of the colonial system and galvanized an entire generation towards nationalism and eventually towards revolution.
And this intense period of injustice, repression, and growing nationalism directly led to the rise of the propaganda movement and then the outright revolutionary movements we discussed with figures like Rizal and Bonifacio.
Yes, absolutely. The Gomber execution was a direct catalyst. 1887 saw the publication of José Rizal's anti-Spanish novel Noli Me Tangere, that foundational work of Filipino nationalism which brilliantly critiqued colonial society and inspired calls for reform. This was followed in 1888 by the founding of La Solidaridad by Graciano López Llarena in Spain, a key newspaper and organization of the propaganda movement advocating for Filipino rights and representation within the Spanish system.
Trying to work within the system initially.
Exactly. But the path soon shifted towards more radical action. By 1892, José Rizal founded the secret Liga Filipina Order, still part of the propaganda movement aiming for reforms, but showing a growing sense of urgency. Concurrently, and perhaps more consequentially, Andrés Bonifacio initiates the Katipunan Revolutionary Movement, a secret society explicitly aiming for independence through armed struggle. This represented the decisive shift towards revolution. The tragic execution of José Rizal, falsely accused of inciting rebellion in 1896, removed the leading voice for reform and became the final spark for many. Following Rizal's death, General Emilio Aguinaldo replaces Bonifacio as the primary leader of the revolution, setting the stage for the formal break from Spain and the Declaration of Independence.
This complex intertwining of intellectual movements, secret societies, martyrdom, and internal power struggles leads us directly into the Philippine Revolution itself, which raged from 1896–1898 and then almost immediately into a new and incredibly complex chapter, the arrival of another colonial power, the United States, who bought the islands from Spain.
Yes, the transition was indeed complex, unexpected for the Filipinos who thought they were achieving independence and fraught with new conflicts. While the Filipino Revolution for independence from Spanish colonialism was reaching its climax from 1896 to 1898, the colonization of the Philippines by the United States began abruptly in 1898 following the Spanish-American War, and this period of American rule lasted until 1946.
And it wasn't a peaceful handover.
Not at all. This period immediately included the brutal and often overlooked Philippine-American War, 1899-1902. The resistance continued longer. Despite the eventual capture of Aguinaldo by U.S. forces in 1901, which was a major blow, many revolutionaries fight on, demonstrating persistent, determined resistance across the islands for years. The major conflict was formally declared ended on July 4, 1902, by U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt.
But under American rule, there were also gradual steps towards self-governance, unlike perhaps under the Spanish.
Yes, that's a key difference in the American colonial approach, often termed benevolent assimilation, though it was still colonial rule. In 1907, the Philippine Assembly, the first popularly elected legislature in Asia, convenes, a truly significant democratic milestone for the region at the time. Then, in 1916, U.S. President Wilson signs the Jones Law, which explicitly granted Philippine independence as soon as a stable government could be implemented. This law also replaced the appointed Philippine Commission with a fully elected Senate and House of Representatives, outlining a clearer path towards eventual independence. By 1935, a major step was taken. The new constitution is approved by President Franklin Roosevelt and the Filipino plebiscite, establishing the Commonwealth of the Philippines, a transitional semi-independent state. Quezon is elected president and Osmeña vice president of the new Commonwealth government.
So independence seemed genuinely within reach by the late 1930s, early 1940s, but then tragically World War II completely interrupted everything, bringing a new, brutal occupation.
Tragically, yes. Just as the Philippines was preparing for full independence scheduled for 1946, war intervened. In 1941, Japanese forces attacked the Philippines and Hawaii on the same day, December 7th, 8th, depending on the time zone. The Philippines was invaded. General Douglas MacArthur orders a retreat to Bataan Province, leading to the infamous Bataan Death March and years of harsh Japanese occupation. Finally, after the devastating war, which saw Manila become one of the most destroyed Allied capitals in 1946 on July 4th, the United States gives the Philippines its independence, formally marking the end of direct colonial rule after more than 3.5 centuries under Spain and the U.S.
Now we finally enter the post-independence era, beginning 1946. But this period seems marked by its own set of significant challenges, particularly the rise and fall of the controversial Marcos regime and the emergence of that unique phenomenon, people power, as a potent force for political change.
Yes, the post-independence era faced immediate challenges. Early political transitions were sometimes abrupt, marked by instability, like when President Roxas, who dies of a heart attack, is succeeded by his vice president, Quirino, in 1948, or the popular President Magsaysay dies in an airplane crash in 1957, cutting short a promising term. But the political landscape shifted dramatically, and for a very long time, in 1965, when Ferdinand Marcos ran for office and is elected president, ushering in what would become a 2-decade-long era defined by his rule.
And the signs of democratic backsliding appeared relatively early.
They did. By 1969, President Marcos and Vice President Lopez win a second term in office in a rigged election, indicating early and troubling signs of democratic erosion, corruption, and the consolidation of power. This culminated dramatically in 1972 when Marcos suddenly declared martial law and rounded up and arrested hundreds of critics, including Aquino and many others, effectively shutting down democracy and establishing one-man rule. This ushered in that long period of authoritarianism, repression, and alleged plunder. The situation escalated further when Aquino was sentenced to death in 1977, although he was granted a temporary reprieve in 1979 for heart surgery in the United States, going into exile there. His fateful return to the Philippines in 1983 and subsequent assassination was the undeniable catalyst, the spark that ignited widespread, unified popular outrage against the regime.
And this directly led to that iconic people power revolution just a few years later, a moment of profound, nonviolent change that really captured the world's attention and imagination.
Indeed. Following Ninoy's shocking death, the opposition, previously fragmented, began to coalesce. His widow, Cory Aquino, declares her candidacy in late 1984 for snap presidential elections called by Marcos in early 1986. Though Marcos claimed victory amidst widespread reports of fraud, this led directly to the People Power Revolution in February 1986. This was a truly landmark moment in global history. Millions of Filipinos, responding to calls from church leaders and others, took to the streets of Manila, particularly along the main thoroughfare EDSA, peacefully blocking tanks and demanding Marcos's resignation. This massive display of nonviolent resistance ultimately led to the military withdrawing support from Marcos, forcing his ousting and exile. It showed the world the immense power of collective, peaceful, popular will.
An incredible moment.
Truly. In 1987, President Aquino establishes a revolutionary government under the Freedom Constitution, quickly moving to restore democratic institutions. This was later replaced by the permanent 1987 Constitution, which remains in effect today, solidifying the return to democracy. And interestingly, the people power phenomenon wasn't just a one-off event unique to 1986. After Fidel Ramos becomes the newly elected president in 1992, succeeding Aquino, and the country weathered challenges like the Asian economic crisis hitting the Philippines hard in 1997, another wave of popular discontent rose against then-President Joseph Estrada amidst corruption allegations. This led to the People Power II revolution in 2001, which again saw massive street protests demanding Estrada's resignation. Concurrently, Gloria Arroyo Macapagal is declared vice president and sworn in by the Supreme Court as the new president, once again demonstrating the continuing power and legitimacy of popular movements to effect political change and uphold democratic principles in the face of perceived crisis or corruption in the Philippines.
We've truly covered a vast and intricate amount of ground today, haven't we? Our journey through the Philippines has taken us from its unique geography, sitting right on the dynamic ring of fire, which constantly shapes its daily life, to its incredibly rich linguistic and cultural tapestry woven across literally thousands of islands.
Yeah, it's been quite a sweep.
We've explored the symbolic expressions of its national identity, both the official ones mandated by law and those powerful unofficial ones that spring organically from the culture. We've delved into the profound and deeply intertwined influence of various religions, indigenous beliefs, Catholicism, Islam, Protestantism, and more. We've also traced the fascinating evolution of its fashion, particularly with the Terno and the Barong Tagalog, a narrative that tells such a compelling story of adaptation, social commentary, and even potent resistance. And of course, we've examined its complex, dynamic history marked by centuries of colonial rule under different powers, fierce struggles for freedom and independence, periods of authoritarianism, and those powerful recurring themes of people power and national renewal.
It's been an incredible journey, absolutely. And what we've hopefully seen is how the Philippines, that pearl of the Orient Seas, is a nation shaped not just by its unique geography, but by millennia of indigenous life predating any outsiders, by centuries of profound colonial influence from both Spain and the U.S., and by decades of ongoing struggle for self-determination and defining its own path. Understanding this rich, multi-layered background, I think, really provides a deeper appreciation for how global cultures interact, that intricate interplay of history and identity, and the truly enduring spirit of a nation that has consistently found ways to adapt, resist, and assert itself amidst diverse and continuous external pressures. It offers a unique and valuable window into global dynamics.
For me, thinking back, the way the Barong Tagalog went from just a simple, humble shirt, forced to be worn untucked as a mark of inferiority, to become such a potent symbol of nationalism and defiance, that was a huge insight. Or how the Catholic Church functions simultaneously as this deeply spiritual institution for millions, and also as a powerful political force capable of shaping national law. That duality is fascinating. It truly shows how everyday elements like clothing or fundamental institutions like religion become deeply embedded in and can even drive a national narrative.
Absolutely. Those examples really stand out. And as you touched upon, that recurring phenomenon of people power revolutions, Ediso Uno in 86, Ediso Des in 01, truly stands out as a unique, potent Filipino approach to democratic restoration and political change when facing crisis. It speaks volumes about the collective will of the citizenry, their faith in nonviolent action, and their capacity to actively shape their nation's destiny when they feel democracy is threatened. The Philippines offers a powerful, if sometimes tumultuous, case study in resilience and democratic self-assertion.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'd like to leave you, our listeners, with a couple of, contemplative thoughts to mull over. Given the Philippines' long and really dynamic history of both adapting to and integrating diverse foreign influences from Asia, from Spain, from America, yet consistently reasserting its unique identity through it all, what does this tell us about the true inherent strength and resilience of a nation's culture in the face of continuous change and powerful external pressures?
And maybe building on that, Considering the cyclical nature of political upheaval from revolution to dictatorship to democratic restoration and the recurring emergence of these powerful democratic movements in its history, what profound lessons, perhaps cautionary tales or inspirational examples, can the Philippines offer the world about democratic resilience, the unwavering human pursuit of freedom, and the undeniable power of a collective citizenry to shape its own destiny, even against formidable odds?
These are powerful questions, I think, and ones that I hope will encourage you to delve even further into the incredible, complex, and ongoing story of the Philippines. There's always more depth to explore beneath the surface of any nation, any culture. And this deep dive, we hope, is just the beginning of your own continued exploration.